Today on Dead Dodge Garage, performance timing curves for dummies like me. Before we get started, just a general reminder that I am not an expert, I'm just some guy, and if you blow up your engine, it's your problem, not mine. This is Dale's Demon. It's a drag car. Kind of. It has a built engine package with a ridiculous camshaft. I built this engine to do one thing: be very, very cheap. Oh, and also burnouts. Then my plans changed a little bit and I put it in this car, intending to go fast on a drag strip. I want to talk about timing curves today because, well, this engine currently doesn't have one, and that's a bit of a problem. And the moment you put together a package like this, your factory timing curve is just not going to work anymore. So let's talk about that. I've seen many group posts over the years from people trying to figure out how to make their cars run right. It's usually something like, I have a performance camshaft and carburetor and this part and that part, and it will die when I put it in gear. It's just not happy. What do I do? What's wrong? And my response to these sorts of questions are always, first, what's your timing situation like? What have you done with that? Now, obviously, as usual, we're using a Mopar small block as the prop here, but this same information can really apply to all kinds of performance engines. Let's say specifically American classic V8s. In the beginning, there was a factory distributor, and that distributor was a compromise. It had a wide timing curve to match the teeny tiny camshaft in a factory engine, and it would give decent results at low RPM, high RPM, all over the place. To accomplish these different amounts of timing at different RPMs, there's a system of weights and springs in here that allows one piece to move away from the other and advance as RPM increases. A tiny factory camshaft like that one is going to produce lots of vacuum at idle, and it will be happy with very little advance. Once you throw away that tiny factory camshaft and put in a performance piece, you can pretty much kiss that factory setup goodbye, because that 5 to 10 degrees at idle is just not going to be enough anymore, and you'll find that your engine idles like garbage. Now, I can't really get into the technical nitty-gritty explaining exactly why timing needs change. They just do. Okay, fine. Camshaft profile, compression ratio, bore size, stroke, and lots of other things all work together to decide how much timing you need at any given RPM and any given load. Obviously, there's no way for me to just say, this is what your engine needs. But be aware that it's going to vary. And that's actually what brings me to making this video today. This is the 340 out of the Demon. I removed it about a month ago. This 340 really liked locked out timing. I set the timing at like 36 degrees and called it a day. It was a little hard to start, but it idled great, and I never had any pinging or indications that it was too much. In fact, it might have liked more if I had enough fuel to support it. And by enough fuel, I mean, race gas or whatever. That's a different story. So, when I slapped that exact same ignition setup in this engine, suddenly it wasn't as happy. And that's because it's a totally different combination with a lower compression ratio, a slightly different bore size, a more aggressive camshaft, but in general, despite being almost the same engine, it's really not. Now, to you veterans in the hobby who have been putting together blown big blocks for decades, none of this is new information. You know this stuff. But to the younger guys who really haven't played with these old cars much, well, I wish someone had explained this to me like 15 years ago. But I figured it out for myself. I guess to really explain what I'm talking about here, we have to at least touch on ignition timing 101. The basics. Spark makes fire. Your engine is an air pump. It's an air pump with pistons. 8 pistons in the case of the ones we're talking about. Unlike most air pumps you might think of, it's fired by internal combustion, hence the name. Notice I had to draw a combustion chamber and I defaulted to a Hemi. What does that say about me as a person? Now, these engines that we play with are 4-stroke engines. That means the piston makes 4 strokes up and down. Well, 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down, whatever, for each time it fires. That means it's fired on 1 stroke, and the other 3, it's not. The spark plug is what lights the fire. It has to do this at a given time. So when we talk about ignition timing, we're talking about when this spark fires in relation to the crankshaft. I've drawn this at TDC-ish. It's a little wobbly. TDC means when this rod is straight up and down and the piston is not moving. Generally, on these engines, we're talking about timing before top dead center, or BTDC. That means we're lighting the spark plug before the piston is done moving upwards, or at least before the rod is done moving over. And that timing number is described in degrees. So you'll hear a number thrown out like 20 degrees BTDC. That means we're lighting that spark plug 20 degrees before the crankshaft reaches TDC for a given cylinder. If we were lighting this spark plug at 0 degrees, that is to say, top dead center, 0 degrees before, 0 degrees after, you would look down at your timing mark and tab with a timing light set at 0 degrees, you'd see this. Now, of course, there are 8 different cylinders in your engine, 4 of them firing each crankshaft rotation, so there are different sparks going on at different points. You don't need to worry about that as long as you've got your spark plug wires in the right order. You just need to worry about it for number 1, and the rest of them are taken care of. Number 1 is kind of the standard reference point for doing this. Nice and easy. You could technically use whatever cylinder is on the opposite side of the firing order as well. In the case of these engines, 6. But that would be silly. The point of lighting the fire before the piston reaches top dead center is to give this flame front time to grow to fill the chamber, cover the entire top of the piston, and make the most power possible at the right time. If it fires too late and the piston's already on its down travel stroke, well, you're just throwing power away. If it fires too early and the piston is still coming up, that flame will be fighting against the movement of the piston, and then you get pre-ignition, which is not good because it'll melt stuff and break things. For every given engine combination, the amount of advance at a given RPM is going to be different. On factory engines, they figure that out for you. You just set the timing to whatever it says on the sticker, and you're good to go. The second you change the engine away from the factory combination, that just doesn't work anymore. If you notice that all of the hand motions in this description were pointed the wrong way, indicating an engine that rotates counterclockwise, you win a cookie. Before we start yarding that MSD distributor out of there and fixing my boo-boo, I want to come back to this factory distributor. A combination like this is probably going to want a total timing number of 32 to 38, let's say, somewhere in that range. Maybe more, probably not more. A stock distributor like this could have a 22 to like 30 degree curve in it. They're not consistent. There are different setups, different years. Who knows which one they rebuilt and sent to you? For the sake of argument, let's say the total timing number your engine wants is 36 degrees. Let's say this distributor has a 28 degree curve. If you tune for that total timing number, subtract whatever I just said, 28 from 36, you've got 8 degrees left. That means your base timing number, the number that the engine idles off of, is 8 degrees. A stock engine barely likes that, and an engine like this is not going to be happy. And that's where modifying your timing curve comes into the equation. With a stock engine, you can live with this. With a built engine, you really can't. You're compromising by trying to not blow it up at the top end and losing power on the bottom end. It just will not be happy. You can kind of tell when this is going on because, well, it'll be gutless and crappy at idle. And when you get into the throttle and the timing advances, whoa, it comes alive. Now, there are modifications that can be made here. For one thing, you can put in lighter springs, try and get that thing to advance at a lower RPM, and that's good. Lots of people have done that. But the curve, the amount of advance this distributor will give you, no matter what RPM it happens at, that's the thing I'm focused on. Now again, I don't have an exact formula for this. I just know an engine like this is going to want more advance at idle, but still needs a reasonable number on top to not blow up and ping and do horrible stuff. So the way to accomplish that is shortening the timing curve. In full race applications, it's not at all uncommon to delete the timing curve entirely. Set it to your number, and you're done. And that's what I've got going on here. Now, there are some drawbacks to that. For one thing, it tends to start like garbage. But not when it's cold for some reason. Oh, I also forgot I already pulled a wire to show you the next thing. The other drawback, if you lock out the timing and set your number, you could have too much advance on the bottom end. If you have a stockish engine, you probably shouldn't do this. On this engine, especially when it's warm, iron heads and whatnot, I was actually getting obvious pinging even at the 32 degrees I set it at conservatively when I was taking off from a stop, when I would dig into the throttle hard. When I had it locked out at 36, the pinging was apparent all the time. Bad. But I know this engine should want that 36 number, give or take, on the top end. And reading the plugs is a good way to verify that. Now, ignoring the fact that this plug looks like absolute crap, we're still a little bit rich, and I just cold started it to move it, so, you know, not ideal. We can come look at the strap here for our timing line. Notice it's actually right at the bend right now. Well, that's not ideal. We really want it down here. I actually backed the timing off a little bit the other day because I was having even worse hard starting than normal and haven't checked it with the gun again yet. Now, this is really only going to be accurate if you're at your full advance number. Ideally under a load, going down the track or something. Ideally, you make a run, shut the car off, coast into the return road, and pull your plug to read it then, because further idling and moving around is going to make this less accurate, but that's neither here nor there. We've got a distinct timing line there, and it clearly wants more. Armed with that information, I know that at least in theory, this engine wants a bunch more timing. But when I dial more timing in with the curve locked out, it's too much, and I get pinging. So, how do we fix that? We fix it by putting a timing curve back in the distributor. Duh! With the plug back in, I'm now going to warm the engine up enough that it will idle happily, and then we can perform the next test. With no choke, and no exhaust crossover to heat the bottom of the intake, it does take this thing quite some time to be happy at idle, but it'll happen eventually. Oh yeah, remind me to relash the valves. Now, I have a pretty good idea what timing curve this engine's going to want, and I also have a pretty good idea what I'm going to do, which is just put the biggest stop back in the MSD distributor and hope it all works out. But I'm going to show you a trick you could use to make sure you're at least in the neighborhood. Setting your idle for highest vacuum is something that's been discussed by multiple people, including Uncle Tony. It's not something you just want to do, again, if you have a stock timing curve in a distributor, because you could end up with 45 or 50 degrees of max timing. I'm going to do it now to find the best, highest, happiest idle with the highest vacuum number that's the most steady, consistent, not dancing around. So, with the distributor kind of loose, I'm going to search around and find that spot. Then, I'll grab the timing gun and figure out what the number is. Wow, apparently that random twist the other day was a lot more than I thought, because it's way happier now. Let's see what the number is now. The distributor wasn't quite loose enough, and I actually popped the cap off. Remarkably, it stayed running like that, so, keep that in mind as a thing that can happen. When I set the distributor to get the highest sounding idle, and was looking at the vacuum gauge, saw the highest number on there, the number was 38. Now, funny enough, I think ultimately this thing's going to want 38 degrees on the top end, but I have to get it to stop pinging and be happier lower in the RPM range, so we're going to end up taking some out anyway. I was twisting the distributor backwards right when I knocked the cap off, and where I ended up was 15 degrees, which is nowhere near enough. So let's advance it again. Steady, easy. Oh, don't mind the clacking in the radiator area. It's just always done that. I don't know why. Anyway, vacuum number coming up. Yes. Okay, we're in the neighborhood. See what we got now. 30. We've got 30. All right, 24 degrees. Idles fairly nicely. We are down on the gauge a bit. It could be higher, but it's just not gonna work in this case. Hey, everything looks totally different. And we're outside now. Also, it's windy. And it's many hours later. So anyway, I don't remember where I was. Basically, this engine currently has a locked out distributor. If you want to go fast and do racing, and you have a high compression, gnarly cam, built engine, locked out timing is probably what you want. Well, it worked great in the 340. In this engine, I'm getting pinging at low RPM. So that's too much timing. But judging by the plug markings, I need more timing on the top end. So I'm going to put a timing curve back in there. Huh. I just noticed the balancer started rubbing on that stupid hose thing. Yay! Anywho, earlier you saw me searching around with a vacuum gauge and a timing light and just kind of listening to the engine. I'm trying to figure out how little advance I can run on the bottom end and have the engine still be relatively happy. So here's what I'm up against. I've got it at 24 degrees right now, and I know I want something like 36 to 38 degrees on top. Even at 24, the vacuum reading is really lower than I'd like, lower than it could be. I went through this same procedure with the 340, and I found that the ideal distributor curve would be 10 to 14 degrees max. Unfortunately, the least you can get out of the MSD is 18. I'm prepared to make that compromise because I'm kind of married to the MSD ignition system at this point. But there are alternatives. Alternative 1. You take your stock distributor apart, and you weld up that slot in there about halfway. That'll give you about half the advance. Obviously, you can file it and tweak it to your exact needs, but it's probably going to be something like, 10 to 12 degrees, if you've got a performance camshaft and a combination something like mine. Uncle Tony has a great video on this. In Uncle Tony's video, he does tell you to weld it in such a way that this is still able to reach the fully advanced position, which means you'd be welding it toward the center there. This is to try to maintain correct rotor facing, because at higher RPM, the rotor should be pointed more squarely at the terminal under the cap. When you get into doing this sort of thing, checking the phasing is something you probably want to do anyway, but that should get you closer. However, an interesting counterpoint to that is this Summit Racing Performance Distributor for the small block Mopar. If you look in there, it's got a screw, and it's attached to a little limiting plate. That plate can slide over and hit the piece that stops it from advancing. So you could lock it out totally. You could pretty much endlessly tweak the amount of advance right there. But it's actually limiting the ability of the rotor to move farther, if that makes sense. You're taking away the fully advanced position, not the less advanced position. That could lead to rotor phasing problems, I don't know. Mopar Performance makes, or used to make, a distributor in this same body, factory appearing, that has the same mechanism, a screw and a sliding plate to limit the total advance. But again, the way it does this is by limiting the rotor's travel on the higher end, not the lower end. So again, you might run into rotor phasing issues. I can't say for sure. I can say that you should check. A great way to check your rotor phasing is to take a spare cap and drill a hole. When you rev your engine up, you should see the spark jumping through that hole straight across to the terminal. It shouldn't be at an angle. You can also point a timing light at it, and with a big enough hole, you can see where the rotor's pointed. Kind of helpful. That's not ideal. Guess I need to clean this. Also looking a little crusty in here. Looks like someone needs to check his rotor phasing. This thing's all rusty and horrifying. And if you look at that scorch mark on the rotor, which I swear I replaced last year, yeah, doesn't look like it's firing right in the center, does it? It's off to the side. Rotor phasing. Okay. I'm pretty sure MSD has the phasing correct in stock form, and it's only like that because I've locked it out. Now MSD makes getting that right pretty easy with this adjustable phase rotor. Of course, this one says EFI on it, but I'm digging around looking for the MSD stop I took out, and well, I do have other options like this. This is a direct connection cast iron performance electronic distributor. It's even got a provision for a mechanical tack drive, which is awesome. This does not have the adjustment I was talking about. I think that came much later. This seems to have a pretty stock curve in it, but I will say it's got very light springs. Yeah. But still my bag goes deeper to this. Yeah. I might need that for something someday, but right now I'm sticking with MSD. Funny enough, this might as well be an MSD. Looks like they use the same springs. All GM stuff, really. But no stop bushings. Anyway, as I was saying, this Pertronics is pretty much an MSD, so as you can see, currently this MSD has no springs or weights or anything at all. Weights? Where are the weights? Anyway, it's bolted together, so there's no timing curve at all. That's called locked out. I think I actually did this in a demon video last year. I don't remember. Man, desperate times were about to call for desperate measures, but I finally found a set. You know, in the last place I looked. I don't even think it's the set I was looking for. That's a green stop bushing. Anywho, now this isn't a video specifically about MSD distributors, but this is one of the most common commercially available ways to accomplish what I'm talking about. Kind of. So, anywho, now we put a stop bushing on there and it goes in that opening. Okay, that's funny. Those aren't standard MSD stop bushings. I don't know what the heck they are, actually. They're all the same OD, but the center hole is drilled differently. Okay, now that I'm thinking about it, I think this green is what was in it, and it's the 23-degree bushing. I'm thinking now I'm going to make this the bushing I want it to be with a welder. The company called FBO actually makes custom stop bushings. There's a 10 and a 12 degree, and those are pretty ideal, but, well, they cost money and I don't have them right now. I was planning to introduce some science into this, but as usual, I can't find anything to measure with, so I'm just going to eyeball it. Try to fill about half that gap with weld. Then I'll sand it down all nice. I'll mount it in there this way, right? So it can still slide. And maybe it'll end up somewhere near to where I want it. Why? Stop. Yeah, gloves. I remember gloves. Oh, we need way more shoots than that. What is going on here? There we go. Oh, if you value your skin, wear a shirt to do this. Almost. Oh, that's more than enough. All right, so it looks like total butt and it's got a tumor. That's fine. Take it over to the bench grinder, clean it up, make it roundish again. Yeah, something like that. Notice the weld is also off to one side, so I can now use this to change the rotor phasing by twisting it this way or this way. Wow, that almost worked out too well. Nice. Nice. All right, now I just have to figure out how the weights and springs go together. Now, of course, you can tweak the spring settings as well to change when you get the advance, but that's not what I'm worried about here. It's really the total amount. Honestly, for the Demon, I'm trying to delay the advance anyway, so heavier springs are probably going to do what I want. All right, back together. Here's our advance. I don't know exactly how many degrees it is, but it's got to be better than 23. Okay, that's interesting. Somehow I ended up with a 6-degree curve. So of course I can just pull that bushing out and file it down some. I can also change the angle it's installed at to affect the curve slightly. I mean, 6 degrees is more than no degrees. And it does like idling at 30 degrees. But will it ping less? Let's see what it does. First off, starting. Better, no question there. Remind me to fix this e-brake handle. Good stuff. Sure sounds happy, doesn't it? It's not fully warmed up. It's about 140 degrees currently. Pinging is my main concern. I don't hear any. Okay, better. Okay, once it's warmed up, still struggles to start, so I'm gonna say probably too much. Why are you yelling? So, obviously we need to tweak it. You might have to do that on yours too. Nah, it's fine. A guy gets pretty good at taking Mopar small block distributors out. What was that noise? I have to clean up this mess. And that mess, because the toolbox charger is currently out getting glass put in it. I'll definitely be pulling the distributor back apart and grinding that bushing down a little bit more to try and get that 10 to 12 degree curve. I think that's going to be perfect for what I want, and it's probably perfect for what you've got going on. If you've got, you know, a mildish cam and somewhat built small block like mine. Anyway, Hopefully you found some of this information enlightening and helpful for your build. If not, well, sorry. In any case, thanks for watching. And remember, it's not the size of the spark, it's the timing of the spark, I guess. Of course, the Demon also needs more primary squirter fuel and a carb spacer and probably a filter with a vapor return line. Listen, it's fine. More on that later.